Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.
The Sparkfile podcast may contain profanity and other adult content.
Please use your discretion.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Welcome to the Spark File, where we believe that everyone is creative, but smart creative people don't go it alone.
I'm Laura Camion.
And I'm Susan Blackwell. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome, but you may be asking yourself, what exactly is a Spark File? Where do I get one? Where do I file in it? These are such good questions, and we actually do have answers.
We do. A Spark File is a place where you consistently collect all of your inspirations and fascinations. And if you're like us and you're making stuff all the time, you know that sometimes the wellspring of inspiration can run a little dry. We're here to refill it.
We are on the lookout for fresh ideas, images, and inspiration that spark our creativity and pique our curiosity, things that inspire us to get up off of our asses and make things like this podcast.
Or a website that spotlights the best theater artists on Broadway.
Or several thoughtfully conceived web series that capture Broadway's brightest at their best.
Or a magazine that centers and celebrates what you love.
Or a Broadway performance that simultaneously makes your dreams come true and makes your pants fill with poo.
Oh, Suze.
It's a poem.
On today's Makersode, we're going to talk to someone who truly sparks us.
And that someone is Paul Wontorek. Paul, welcome to the Spark File.
Hi, ladies. Hi, how you doing? I'm nervous. I'm not usually the one being interviewed.
Oh, girl, I feel you. I would much rather be in the interviewer's chair. I think I'm a little bit like, give me this job. But today you've got to take it. You've got to sit there and you got to take it.
Mostly we're kind and mostly we're gentle. Not always, but mostly.
P-Dubs, we are so happy that you're joining us today, and we're going to start with the basics. Where are you right now, and how are you right now, but for reals?
First of all, you just revealed my Peloton name, which is P-Dubs, which is like something that only like 3 people have ever even said that, and I love that you just said it.
Does that mean someone could find you and like race you on Peloton now that they know that you're P-Dubs? Is that what that means?
I don't really understand I don't like interacting with people on Peloton, but people always ask me what my name is, and now they know. It's P-Dubs.
There you go. The cat's out of the bag. P-Dubs.
So I am in my lovely home in the Catskill Mountains in upstate New York, and I'm doing great.
Oh, that's lovely. Hey, before we go any further, we do have to request the Sparkfile price of admission. Can you tell us a creative risk that you have taken recently?
Okay, like 4 hours ago. I took that
recent.
We got a hot one here. So what I did is something I've been doing often, I went live on Instagram. I love your reaction, Susan.
I don't know about it.
It's something I've watched other people do, and I've always been sort of terrified about it, and didn't know what I would ever do live on Instagram. I didn't want to like walk around my house or show myself shaving or brushing my teeth or. And I want to take.
I will say you could have showed. You've sent me video before of just you styling your hair. I think for my birthday last year, I was like, for my birthday, you said, I was like, how do you do your hair? And you're like, happy birthday, here you go. And it was just like it wasn't sped up. It was just 2 straight minutes of you styling your hair. To perfection, I might add.
To perfection. I'll
that's
add
not
that.
what you wanted to do today on Instagram Live.
That's not what we were talking about.
No.
But your hair is amazing. And you have a real like Jason Bateman look. Has anyone ever said that? And I mean that in the highest compliment.
I mean that in the hottest possible sense.
Hottest compliment. I mean, really.
I used to get Matthew Perry all the time, and I didn't ever understand that. But Jason Bateman is a new one. I'll take it. I'm into it.
Yeah, you should take it.
Mm-hmm. What I'm doing on Instagram Live. So I recently inherited an enormous collection of Broadway themed vinyl.
Wow. And that's cool. That's fun.
Like a lot, like a really rare collection. A good friend of mine, Michael, his husband of 49 years, Nick, died recently. And he had this amazing collection. And Michael gave it to me because he thought that it'd be in good hands. So what I've been doing is taking a random vinyl album, putting it on my turntable, and going live and teaching people about and researching things myself.
Yeah.
So today I did it with Raisin, the 1974 Best Musical winner, the musical version of A Raisin in the Sun, which I actually had never listened to before. So I did a little research before I went live because I want them to be educational and informative. And we listened to the album together. And I sort of talked to people. And it's fun. But it was terrifying.
That's like the purpose. Like if you're going to go live on Instagram, that's like the best use of that platform. Like something fun, something surprising, something educational. That's just delightful.
How long are you live though? A whole album. That's a long.
So I jump around a little bit. And double discs are just too much. Sometimes it goes on too long. But what's been interesting about it is I've really loved digging into the research and reminding myself of why I love Broadway with these scores and really like teaching myself at the same time. But it's also inspired so many other things inside me that I would have never guessed just by hitting that live button. My brain is just working in different ways now. And I'm coming up with other things I want to do. And so I think the lesson is just sort of go for it and don't be afraid of making a fool of yourself. And it's also great practice just to talk.
It is good practice to talk.
Now you're going to be like Madonna, like, why live off camera? Why?
Warren Beatty was very upset about that. Yeah.
Still holding a grudge.
I will say, in addition to being, I think, like a really good spark generator and practice and brain stimulator, it's also a beautiful remembrance of your friend who passed away.
Yeah.
It's lovely. What a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think you are officially admitted into the Spark File. That's a pretty phenomenal answer, I have to say.
And the doors slid wide open.
Wide open for you, Paul.
It's beautiful in here.
Thank you.
Tell the people what you see.
It's encrusted in Swarovski crystals.
Hey, for people who don't know you, can you tell us, how do you identify creatively? Like when people ask, what do you do? How do you answer that?
So my go-to is always just to say I'm a journalist. Which
that makes you sound very classy.
Well, the funny thing is, when I met my boyfriend on Bumble, my profile said I was a journalist.
Was your profile name P-Dubs? P-Dubs 69. No.
But he's a civilian. He's not in show business.
Oh.
So he assumed I was like a war correspondent. Like in his brain, like...
And in fairness,
Yeah.
Hey, there are days.
So he just immediately went to something really important and serious. Although he did also, once he saw me, he actually recognized me from an infamous Patti LuPone interview I did once, a clip which went viral, and he actually recognized me from that. But
wow.
So journalist is sort of my catch-all. I'm really proud of the title editor-in-chief because it just sounds very important, and I've always loved that title.
Yes.
I'm also a talk show host. I'm a TV producer, a creative director. I like the Don Draper side of me. Correspondent, reporter. I'm all kinds of things, but journalist is sort of my catch-all.
Yeah.
Nice.
You're multi-passionate.
And how long have you been at Broadway.com?
So 2020 was supposed to be my year of anniversaries. It was marking 30 years in New York City,
Great.
20 years at Broadway.com, and 10 years doing my talk show people. So that was it was all even numbers. And then the pandemic hit, and all those anniversaries still were
count.
true.
Yeah.
But it just, it wasn't celebrated in the same way. So I now have passed 21 years at Broadway.com.
Wow. Congrats.
Significant.
And the editor-in-chief. Hail to the chief.
It's crazy.
How old were you when you started there, and what was your first job there?
So I started there when I was 27.
Cute.
And I am, do the math. Yes, I am 48. Yes.
I'm bad at math, but okay.
And my first job was really editor-in-chief. There was about a month where I was managing editor, but the person who was editor-in-chief left before the website launched. And so when Broadway.com launched, I was the editor-in-chief. I don't know if there are any other editor-in-chiefs in publishing that have been doing the job that long. I actually don't know.
And that you launched it. Like you've been literally the editor-in-chief since its inception.
Yeah.
I feel extremely tied to it.
Yeah.
To the brand, to the name. I take a lot of pride in it, but I'm my own person as well. So, it's interesting.
Oh, we're going to get into it. Pure full disclosure for our listeners, you and I have collaborated together for years at Broadway.com. And as editor-in-chief that you are, you invited me to do some on-camera correspondence work with you years ago, just some silly stuff. And that grew into some other silly stuff of us working together for over 10 years. We have done Side by Side by Susan Blackwell. And then behind the scenes, you've brought me in to work with your staff and coach them. And we've partnered on so much together, so many things that I'm so proud of. And I have a policy, just a life policy. I think it's important to say what you mean to say to people when you have a chance. So let me take this opportunity to thank you for all the adventures you've brought me into. There is no question here. It's just gratitude. But I also just want to acknowledge to the listeners what a big part of my life you have been for the past 10 years, and how much fun we've had together making shit.
That's very sweet. I adore you, and I love all of the opportunities to get to watch you do your thing. I love, the constant collaboration, just constantly growing, right? It's like an ongoing thing all these years. And
I know. I love it.
I cherish you as a friend as well.
Likewise. And I like to mirror it back to you. It's so fun to watch you. And then we're going to stop just polishing each other's knob, just buttering each other's bread. It's so fun to watch you have all the things you've made and all the success at Broadway.com. But then, like you said, you're just one of those people. And it's the reason why we wanted you on the podcast. You're just one of the most creative people that I know personally. You are sort of endlessly creative. So anyway, let's get into it. Let's talk about why and how and where and who.
Yeah. Can you maybe start with telling us tell us a story, Paul.
Paul, tell us a story.
Tell us a story about the first time you saw a theater piece that changed your life.
Well, I grew up in Connecticut, so I was exposed to theater. My parents brought me to the city, and we saw Grease, Annie, Cats. Those are the three you had to see. That was the order.
Checklist.
And I have to say, and then I really started getting involved myself. And I was doing some work up when I was in high school. I was actually volunteering at Theater Works, which is an equity theater in, oh no. Sorry, Henry's bringing his toy.
Henry, we have a all dogs allowed policy.
Yep, all dogs allowed.
And we're going to keep all of it in.
The sound too.
Yes. That's right. Get it, Henry. Get it.
He was like sound asleep, and then the minute he saw I was doing something important,
he's like, "Are you podcasting?" Tick, 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 tick.
Henry, come here. Hold on, I'm going to give him something. You're going to edit this, right?
No, all of it stays in.
Okay. Heroin. And then when I was in high school, I actually started doing volunteer work for this equity company, Theater Works, which was just starting up, and it's still a great company in Hartford. A lot of great performers and talents work at. So I wound up creating a circle of friends because of this theater group, other people that loved theater, people much older than me. But I would start hanging out with, people in their 30s and 40s. And I didn't even have my driver's license at first. And then I got my driver's license and would hang out with them. And I would go to bars with them after the show. But I wasn't drinking. I just had Sprite. And we started going to theater in New York together without my parents all the time. So I started to really constantly go to New York and really seeing a lot of things in the late 80s. But the show that really blew my mind was Grand Hotel. That's always the go-to show that I talk about because it was theater magic. It was everything that I personally love. I love heightened emotions, heightened visuals, sets, costumes, drama. Like I love all of that. And I remember specifically the feeling of we were in the front mezzanine of the Martin Beck, now the Al Hirschfeld. And I remember feeling like I was walking on air, walking on the show. Like I remember it just so vividly. So that it was Grand Hotel. It's always Grand Hotel.
Forever and always. Was there a time ever that you thought you might want to be a performer? Or did you always know like you would have a relationship to Broadway, but what that relationship might be? Did you have clarity on that?
The answer is hell no. Never wanted to be anywhere near never wanted the attention on me. Even putting myself on camera was a huge leap for me at Broadway.com. And it happened many years into my time there. Yeah. Never wanted to be a performer. And if that's unusual among Broadway journalists, most of them definitely were in the high school shows. I was doing props at the high school show. I was not.
You were instrumental even then.
Yep.
Yes.
Because of your passion for theater, you started creating theater-related content from a pretty young age. Can you tell us about some of that early stuff that you were making?
So when I was in high school, when I started seeing a lot of theater, I started obsessively following the business of theater. I would every Friday. I remember driving on my way to high school.
At parties, Jesus
going to
Christ!
I was going to the newsstand and buying the Friday New York Times, the weekend section, because it had the column. Alex Witchell wrote the column then at that point. And I remember, reading the Phantom of the Opera review the day it came out, and I remember I started following the business side of it.
God, that's fascinating.
And also starting to write about it for like the school paper. I was also an art student. I almost went to art school. I was really like I would draw, I would do a lot of graphic design. And
I don't think I knew that.
I think it would have been a very different path now because I didn't really have technical skills. Like I couldn't draw, the bowl of fruit correctly. It was more of a graphical visual. And because we weren't like doing computer graphics at that time, I feel like it could have been a whole different path for me.
It's an interesting thing though, because now you're in this position this perfect position for yourself where you can have a vision and then direct somebody else to execute the vision.
That's what I love. That's what I love more than anything.
Just bossing people around like that. Yeah.
So can you tell us about like some of the early stuff that you made?
It was writing about Broadway. It was not that different from what I was doing now. And then when I came to New York City to go to school at Fordham at Lincoln Center, I immediately joined the school paper and I started writing Broadway reviews. And I would also be reviewing the student production. So
was there anyone else? I'm curious, like, did you have to like compete to get the role of the critic in, at the paper? Or was it like a wide open field and you were like, oh, this is what I want to do. I'm doing it.
Honestly, my whole career, I don't really feel like I've been competing with people to get things. It's all just sort of fallen into place. And so when I was writing for the school paper, no, there weren't other people that were interested in theater at that time. And then I started interning. Within a year, I started an internship at Theater Week magazine, which was a big magazine in the 80s and 90s. And very quickly got an opportunity to write reviews for them. And then I got to write a cover story with Debbie Gibson in early 1992 when she was going into Les Miserables. And that was my first big star moment. So I really was, and yeah, there were other writers there that I was, I guess, competing with, but I was also just sort of there. And I don't know, I feel like I've just always been sort of adaptable and in the right place and willing to do the hard work, honestly.
It's interesting to me, though, because from a really, really young age, you've had a pretty clear personal vision. And yes, right place at the right time. Yes, stepping into opportunities as doors open. But also, there was something inside of you that was really clear about what you liked and what you wanted to do from a pretty young age.
I just never thought I could make a career of it. So when I graduated college, I would do jobs. I worked in advertising because I really went much more on the design element. So I would run like the design department in an ad agency. I would work in marketing.
When you were when you were 12? Like when were you running the design? When were you living these lives? Were you like 24 or something?
Yeah, like exactly. In my early 20s. And but I would always write about Broadway on the side. I would always take freelance jobs writing for these different magazines. And but I just never thought it would be a career. But I even started my own magazine in 1995, 96. And all my friends just helped me out. And I designed the whole thing myself, laid the whole thing out. I got a photographer, Deborah Lopez, and she took photos.
Oh my God. Deborah Lopez took my first headshots.
Really?
Amazing.
Deborah she did all sorts of amazing photography for me.
She's a great photographer.
I would write, the cover stories. My friends would write things. And then the best part was I was doing it at one point. I was working for this like marketing company on Park Avenue South. And I would work like the night. I feel like I would work until like 8:00 at night, maybe. It was an off hour. And then I would stay there until 2 or 3 in the morning using all their equipment, all their computers, all their printers. Sometimes I even had friends come into the office at night and I ran it as like my magazine's office at night and no one ever knew.
Oh my God. Yes. Laura Camion and I hope we don't get retroactively fired, but have produced so many shows out of the offices where we've worked.
Yes.
The phone calling, the wheeling, the dealing.
Printing scripts.
Yes, baby. That's how you do it. Were you just this young renegade upstart blazing your own trail, or were there mentors that were sort of helping you get there along the way?
A lot of this has really come into focus for me very recently as I've gotten older, and I've really started especially in the last year, I've really looked back a lot on my whole journey to get where I am. And I because I've never really had close relationships with teachers. It's interesting. I always saw education as just sort of like what I had to do to get to what I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I would go to class and then I would go and do the amazing things at night and all the things I really wanted to do. So I think I always kind of had a distant relationship with teachers, but I absolutely, when I look back, did you guys see The Inheritance on Broadway?
No.
Matthew Lopez's
You
play.
love that show, but no, I didn't see it.
That play rocked me. And there was very specifically, there's a relationship in it between the main character Eric and this older gay man Walter. And I found the relationship so moving because it's really kind of what the heart of what The Inheritance is about, which is sort of the passing down of generations of gay men from an older generation to a younger generation. And when I really start thinking back, I had that in a lot of different ways. Like when I was working in that theater company, when I was in high school, Theater Works, they would bring all these actors in from New York City. And there was this actor named Mark Shannon, who's no longer with us. And he really, I was his dresser, my one experience being a dresser. And we just built this amazing friendship. And he was from New York City. And his partner was R. Tyler Gatchell, who was a big general manager on Broadway. And so he was like probably the first gay man I ever met, but he also was someone working on, he was in Jesus Christ Superstar on Broadway. And so he was someone who was actually in this world. And then, he kept this friendship up with me where he would write me letters like from Andrew Lloyd Webber's Sidmonton estate. He'd be like, "Oh, we're at Sidmonton," and I was like,
just
in
trying to blow
Connecticut.
your mind.
And I would be like, "Oh my God!" And then when I would go to New York, he would get me tickets. And then when I moved to New York, he also always took me to theater, and he definitely was a mentor of mine. And then the man Michael Alasa I mentioned earlier, who's the one whose husband I inherited, speaking of The Inheritance, this amazing record collection from. He ran this theater in the East Village called the Duo Theater, still does. And he, I used to work there. I wrote an article about this show called Born to Rumba, which was this amazing musical that played off Broadway for many years. And it was kind of like cabaret set in Havana, pre-Castro Havana, Cuba. And it sparked an interest in Cuba, which I still have. But he became someone who's very much opened me up to Broadway, Broadway shows, learned so much about Broadway. And then there was another guy there, Aldi Rodriguez, I became really good friends with, who was one of the actors in the show. And he also, when I started writing, he would, you remember phones? I used to be on the phone with my friend Al.
Do you mean phones
We
with
used
like a
to talk.
curly keyboard?
We used to talk on the phone all night. Like we used to, and whenever I would write like my freelance articles, I'd interview somebody for a magazine. Al would literally I would read him the article when I finished writing it, and he would help me rewrite them. Like he was such a sounding board for me, and he's no longer with us anymore either. So it's interesting. I've really been sort of thinking about all of these really influential people in my life. But it's interesting how it was very separate from it's street education. It wasn't the education I was getting in class.
What I find so interesting about that is sometimes people can falsely believe that they sort of got themselves there and they did it on their own. They have this false notion of this. And I love that you have this awareness that there were actually these people along the way. And I'm saying this just not because I think it's interesting, but also I ask myself and I ask y'all who are listening to this, who has helped you and who could you help? If you see somebody and you're like, that kid's got moxie, how you can support people along the way and how you can reach back and thank people in the way that you just did so beautifully.
Well, actually, when I spoke to my friend Michael when his husband died, he said to me, "Oh, Nick and I have always been so proud of you." And he said, "We watched the Sondheim concert you made. We watched it so many times, and we were just so proud of you." And it's so moving when because people don't talk like that to each other enough in the day-to-day life, and it takes these big emotional moments to have those those conversations sometimes.
I want to have those conversations all the time.
All the time. Those are the best and most important ones. I keep thinking also about how you're describing what I think a lot of people can relate to is this, like, there's work and then there's this hustle outside of work to do the thing that, really fuels you and feeds your soul that you love. I'm curious to know, like, when the day arrived that your life was structured, your work was the thing that you loved. Like, how did you adapt to that? Was that a strange sensation to be like, oh my gosh, now this stuff that I was doing, on my own because I love it, like, this is now what I wake up and do?
Well, because it was the internet in the year 2000, we spent the first 4 or 5 years thinking that it was going to fold at any minute. You know what I mean? Like, it was just, the internet buzz.
It's just passing fad.
There was no comfort, really. It took probably a good 10 years before it started feeling like, I guess this job is kind of staying. There's some good security here. But the danger is that it's very easy to make it your entire life. And I definitely dated my career for a real long time. It took a real long, and of course the horrible inside joke of that is that my start date at Broadway.com is Valentine's Day, the year 2000. So I used to always joke that, like, that was my that was my lover at Broadway.com. But finding a work-life balance has been the biggest challenge, and it feels good that I think I finally have pulled it off.
That's good.
Well done.
I'll say one of the reasons I'm proud to work for Broadway.com is because I love my peeps there, but also because I think the quality, I've said this to you so many fucking times, Paul, but I think that the quality of the content is creative and it's polished. And I believe you all are making things that are a cut above. And you have been generating content for a long fucking time. And I have witnessed over the years this deep trust and confidence that you have in yourself, that you have no scarcity of ideas. You're one of the few people I know who is just like, I got 1 million of them. And once I use those, I'll make more, which has always been a point of fascination for me with you. So I just wonder, how do you remain inspired? How are you pulling off this magic trick, this sort of bottomless well of inspiration and ideas?
Well, the most important thing is having a fantastic team of people. I'm really proud of I'm constantly inspired by the people on my team. Now, this is not the easiest thing to talk about right now because the team has reduced thanks to COVID. So that's actually probably the
painful.
hardest thing. Yeah. The hardest thing to not have everybody on the team. But Beth Stevens has been my managing editor for 21 years. She started right after me. Yeah. She and I are an amazing team. We're able to sit down and things just flow.
Bethy.
I like to find inspiration. A lot of the inspiration comes from outside of the Broadway community. I'm not really, I don't spend that much time looking at what other people creating content about Broadway are doing.
Yes.
I don't feel like I'm ever really doing that.
Yeah, and you sometimes always have your nose in like film. Yeah. And yes, that is true. Yes, that is true about you. That's right.
And so a lot of times people will say like, oh, did you see what this one did or this one did? And I'm just kind of like, no, I haven't. So and they don't believe me. They think I'm like lying. And I'm like, no, I'm really not paying attention. I'm really focused on. And then at the end of the day, we're creating content that is promoting shows at the end of the day. So a lot of the inspiration has to come from the actual material and from the people. I've always been inspired by the creative stars of Broadway. And that when I first started, my inspiration really came from Vanity Fair. And that I was really looking more that direction. And I felt like nobody was covering Broadway in a way that acknowledged how exciting I found all of the talents of Broadway to be. I felt like all of the other journalistic outlets were treating them like workers within an industry. And I wanted them to be stars, and
Like
I wanted to sort of like elevate them and act like they were stars, the stars that I saw in my eyes. So now that's all shifted, because now there's so much, that's always the interesting thing. Social media has changed so much. People being able to create their own content. And it was very different 21 years ago when we were first looking at it. And so, but yeah, the inspiration comes from outside. Right now, I'm really inspired by this old Broadway vinyl and Hollywood movies. I found myself really like immersing. I've had to sort of surround myself recently with reminding myself of the things that initially inspired me. And that's what I'm getting from this Broadway vinyl. It's reminding, I love reading. I used to discover, I didn't see that much theater when I was a kid. I would discover plays by reading them and imagining them. And I would read the libretto of musicals coming from Andrew Lloyd Webber or old musicals. And I would get this vinyl and I would read it and I would study what it said. And so I'm trying to like recapture that a little bit right now. And surrounding myself a little bit with those things that I think sparked me when I first fell in love with all this.
Yeah. This is so amazing because Suze knows this. I've been rereading Twyla Tharp's The Creative Habit, which, is like a 20-year-old book. And I'm just like, I'll just see, does this hold up? And there's this entire section in there where she's like, a lot of times people think they need to look forward for inspiration, like out and forward. And she has an entire chapter about memory and looking back and really culling from that lived experience, from those unearthing those memories or those sensations, like from when you first went to the theater. That just makes so much sense to me. That gift of vinyl is a gift to all of us, because I'm imagining like what's going to come of it out of your brain. It's exciting.
And also it was terrifying because I am a minimalist, so I'm not really big on clutter. So the concept of having these boxes of vinyl, but I found a great way to organize them, and it's not, but it was also terrifying because of that.
Wow. You've made so many things. Like, you've just been at this for long enough to like really spread your wings and do a lot. Is there something that you've made at Broadway.com that you are particularly proud of?
There are a lot of things, as you mentioned.
Like side by side, I guess.
Side by side.
I just feel like that's
Susan Blackwell.
There's that.
That one definitely has
top of the list.
Has the best theme song. That definitely has the best theme song.
Thanks, Poppy.
I personally am very proud, obviously, of these interviews I've done, Show People, which is because when I started doing them, there was no opportunity for long form interviews with Broadway actors. Like, you would only see Broadway actors if they went on Rosie O'Donnell or if they got to sing on the Today Show and then they spoke for like 2 minutes. You never heard much from them.
That was
at the
revolutionary.
time, it was very novel.
Yeah, Rosie O'Donnell was like, it was a revolutionary idea to have theater people on national television.
But now you can hear 2-hour interviews with any Broadway performer whenever you want, thanks to podcasts. I mean, and Instagram live videos. But at the time that felt really special. But I'm also really proud of this series called Character Study that we've done, which is
that's beautiful. That's a beautiful series.
I love the video. I love the talent that I've been able to find in my time there, whether it's illustrators or video artists or directors or writers or editors. There's all these amazing people that I've been able to collaborate with. And Character Study was a way of, I love documentary film. I could easily see myself directing a documentary film at some point.
Please do.
But these are sort of little mini docu series where you're watching an actor turn from they enter as themselves into the theater, and then they walk out as their character, and it's a voiceover. It's a voiceover where they're talking about the process. And when I started making those, and beautifully shot and edited, but when I started making those, I really wanted something that I imagined, like, can you imagine if you can go on YouTube right now and find one of Patti LuPone backstage at Evita? Like the history. I love I love creating things that last. I love you know what I mean? I really love leaving things behind, and I love finding things from the past that were left behind. And so I'm really, that's like when something like Clubhouse comes around, I think like that's so temporary. There's no like archive. Like it just happens in mid, and that sort of stuff terrifies me because I love making content, but I also love it to live on.
Well, you have literally archived the 20 years of Broadway like never before. You know, prior to that, there's so many lost years of like maybe scraps that we can find, scraps of information or scraps of video.
Kinescopes. It's fun. The other thing that's fun, I'm serious, like these weird, like that weird glowy black and white sort of footage. One of the things that's fun too, it's just occurring to me in real time, is I think this is true for you, Paul. I think it's true for me as well, that there's a lot of people, the majority of people, that if you're a kid and you love theater or you love Broadway, you're not getting into New York. The majority of, you live in Japan, or you live in Scotland, or you live in Scottsdale, Arizona. And things like the interviews that you have done, and even the wackadoo stuff that I've done with you for Broadway.com, now that we've been doing this for quite a long time, don't people come up to you all the time and say, before I ever could make it to New York to see a Broadway show, I felt like I was included in this community because of the interviews that you were making. So that's a fun reach too, like that you reached your virtual hand across the country or around the globe and gave people a chance to come into something. I think that is a gift that Broadway.com has created, that you have created for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Again, not a question, just me talking.
The amazing turning point was when the stars of shows told me that they grew up watching Broadway. That's when I was like, oh crap, I've been doing this a long time. That's right. Yep.
Paul, how's your relationship to creativity been during this long stretch of pandemic?
So it's been interesting because I was actually on vacation when the shutdown happened. I was in the country of Jordan.
Whoa.
Staying in a bubble hotel in the middle of a desert in Wadi Rum.
You roll.
So it was crazy. So I came back. When I came back, Broadway was shut down. So I immediately just came upstate to my home. And I think I initially just jumped in and started doing things like, okay, nothing's different. We're still doing this. We're doing this. We're doing this.
Yep.
We're doing our live show every day. And I remember, I think my staff had a different relationship because they had been in the office and were watching it all sort of slowly shut down and, hearing about people getting COVID and all these experiences.
Yeah.
And they were kind of like, is it appropriate that we're going live on? And I was like, well, we're going to make it appropriate. We're going to be there and we're going to sort of just keep up some normalcy. That was the initial goal. Sort of like, let's just keep going. And so I actually jumped into some big I did this Rosie O'Donnell show that happened like a week into the shutdown.
Yeah.
Because Eric Bergen called me and he had approached Rosie O'Donnell and he said, do you want to do this live show? So I said, great. I don't know really how to do that, but I figured it out and I ran the entire thing and kept the whole thing going live and learned how to do that. And then I did this reading of Lips, The Other Teeth Apart, the Terrence McNally play, right after he died. And that had an amazing cast of people. And then the Sondheim concert, and then buyer and seller, Michael Urie. So I started just like, I was working on one big thing after the next. And then I started working on a Tony special that hasn't aired yet. But like there's been one big project after the next. And I actually had to get to a point where I was like, okay, you need to like sort of
Calm
accept
down.
the
Yes.
world
Yeah.
now. You kind of
Yeah.
have to actually like breathe and really focus on what you're working on, because I was doing a lot of that, not with my entire staff like I normally would, because you can't do it all remote. You know, a lot of it was just me. I was just doing a lot of it here. So I felt very creative at first, and then I sort of like was trying to navigate where I was, and now I feel like I'm the right level of creative, and I feel like we're keeping things going, we're keeping things interesting. We're producing a weekly television show now called Broadway Profiles. That's a syndicated show, and I'm doing a lot of interviews for that. That's sort of the main focus right now. Yeah, but I'm starting to feel more creative. I'm starting to, what I mean? It's starting to feel inspired in me a little bit.
Something that listeners and even Broadway.com fans may not know about you, Paul, is that you are hard of hearing. And if you're comfortable talking about it, can you tell us a bit about your hearing loss and how it's impacted your work and your creativity?
Yeah, I would love to talk about it. I used to never want to talk about it. And now I actually, in recent years, have been encouraged to sort of own it. And I used to always just sort of say, I'm deaf. I used to just always just like say that to people. And I don't say that anymore because I'm not deaf. I'm hard of hearing. It's interesting as a journalist. It's interesting how it comes up. Like, for example, I was just sent a screener of In the Heights, the film, which is, coming out. And so I was very excited to see. And it was great. But
can't wait.
But I will say, I usually require closed captioning.
Yeah.
I usually have the closed captioning on my television.
Yep.
And it's just become sort of it's a given. And when I got the screener, immediately you realize like, oh, there's not going to be closed captioning on this rough cut for press people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it comes up in ways that people don't realize. People don't realize there are so many specific things like that make it difficult. Also, being at a Broadway opening night party.
Oh my gosh.
Is a social nightmare for me.
Well, you and I have done big events like that where it'll be the two of us tag team interviewing somebody between us. Yeah. And we'll position you so that the ear that has better hearing will be closer to the action that you need to hear. But I've seen the struggle. Like I've seen you have to navigate that. And I have to say, like, it seems like it would be very tiring in a situation like that to try to kind of keep up with it.
I've had to fake it a lot. I have faked moments in interviews my entire career. There have been moments where I don't. Sometimes I have watched an interview later on and said, "Oh, that's what happened there." Yeah. And sometimes it's a miss. And I also I fought wearing hearing aids for a very long time. And I finally started wearing hearing aids that were like buried inside my ear, so I didn't want anyone to see them. And then, the quality level is not the same as wearing an over the ear hearing aid. And then I finally had a moment, thanks to being in a great relationship and having a partner who was very supportive of it as well, where I was just like, I don't care about people knowing I'm wearing a hearing aid, but it's a social thing. It's so different from glasses. I mean, glasses are having bad eyesight is so socially acceptable. It's a different world, and everyone just equates hearing aids with being old and being an older person who needs them because they're old. And I don't know where it started. I finally saw like a hearing expert, and he basically told me nothing. He basically said, like 1 in 1,000 people just have crap hearing, and it's just going to keep getting worse. And you're one of those people, and there's no reason for it. It just is what it is.
So insightful.
Yeah, very
Thank
insightful.
you.
I'm glad I found the best guy there was in Manhattan. And so, you have to just sort of figure it out on your own, and you have to have pride in yourself. And I don't know, but I also think socially, because parties are a nightmare, because the options are either I go to an opening night party without wearing hearing aids, and I'm basically just hearing a loud level of noise all night. And people, if they yell into my ear, I can probably hear them. Or I wear a hearing aid and it's just like deafening levels of noise. And so what I was getting at is I know for a fact that many people think of me as very aloof. And a lot of that comes from the way I act when I'm in these social situations. And I know that, and I avoid conversation a lot of times because instead of, and by the way, you have no idea how many people, if you say to them, even in the quietest room, if you get some low talker come up to you and then you say, I'm sorry, I'm hard of hearing, can you speak up? You don't know what percentage of people literally then say it at the exact same volume. They do not adjust. They literally just don't listen. Like they just assume. But also socially, I have also come to realize that I have intentionally been drawn to people whose voices I can hear. So I have chosen relationships and that are people that I can communicate with, and I have avoided people who I have no idea what they're saying. And that's just fascinating because it took me a long time to realize that. But I'm in fantasy land right now because I'm in COVID. I'm in my house. All the voices I hear are all electronic. I can adjust the volume everywhere. And everyone is wearing, earbuds at all times. And I am in complete control of all volumes in my environment right now. So it's been heaven. In that sense.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's interesting. I actually think there are times, just because we have spent so much time together, where I have seen exactly what you're describing, where I can see when you haven't heard, and it's either something I've said or something someone else has said, and you are just going to like keep the social ball in the air and keep it moving. And it's a good reminder. I think it's a good reminder for me and Laura and people who speak publicly and people who just speak as they move through the world, which is all of us, to remember that not everybody can hear the same way that you can hear. Not everybody can see the same way that you can see. I think it's a really, really good reminder. And I'm glad that you're feeling more comfortable about just talking about it and just being at peace with it.
You know what's I just remembered one of the first, I think the first week that I got my over the ear hearing aids, I wore them to work. And I was doing an interview on Live at 5 on Broadway.com with a big music star, actually. And I did the interview with him, and it ended. And at the very end, he said, "Oh, I saw your hearing aid." And he just said that to me. And I was just so like thrown, you know what I mean? Because I'd never like spoken. Most people just avoid saying something or, but he was and I was like, "Oh yeah." And he said, my son wears the same hearing aids. And then I was like, "Oh," so I was able to have this conversation with him. And then actually like a week later, I saw him in the theater district with his son, who's like a little boy wearing hearing aids. But it was so interesting to interact in the open about it and to talk about it with someone. So now I think people need to understand that hearing loss happens in people of all ages, and as a society, I think we do have to sort of be a little. People also just love to make fun of it. You know what I mean? I think people with bad eyesight deal with this as well, but. Even people are very close to me. People can be really loose with their words about like, "Oh, he's deaf. He didn't hear you." This constant. And so I have, now I'm in a place where I want to be really direct about it and be really open and direct with people about it. So
I love it.
I love talking about it, actually.
I love that you love talking about it. That makes me so happy. I just love any time for myself and for anybody. There's a freedom in that self-acceptance that I just love it. I love it for you. I love it for all the people listening. I love it for me. I love it for Laura. I think it's great.
Yeah. I think, and the more that we talk about those things, you know, that we maybe have been self-conscious about, the more freedom we give to everyone else. Like, oh my gosh, oh, you've experienced that too. Me too. And we can only do that when we like shine a light on it. So thank you for talking to us about it.
Absolutely.
Hey, this is an entirely different topic.
This is a seg.
This is a total seg. Can you tell us what it felt like to make a one night only appearance on Broadway in the musical The Prom? Did you do that? Did you make a one night only appearance?
That, Paul?
Was that you?
So listen to me. I was approached, I want to say 6 weeks prior to this shenanigans. And I was asked, they said, we want to do this special thing where the opening scene, there's a reporter on stage. We want to use people from the Broadway community. Would you be willing to do it? And I immediately went into panic mode because I was just like, this is horrifying, but I love The Prom. Like, I loved that show.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I would have done it for any other show, to be totally honest.
Oh my gosh.
Grand Hotel.
Yeah, maybe Grand Hotel. Maybe a reporter in the lobby of the hotel.
And I got to do scenes with Beth Level and Brooke Shismanskas. Like, it was like,
okay.
So that's what, so I said yes. And then
you began shitting yourself.
Sleep. I shot myself.
Nightly.
And I did not sleep nightly. And I studied my lines and yes, I did it. And I have to say that the buildup to it was horrifying. But then the minute that it was over, I was like, oh, I could do that again.
Oh,
welcome to show
maybe
business,
I
Paul.
do want to be a performer.
The panic came from, honestly, not having a tech rehearsal. Because it was the panic came from not knowing what it felt like to have the lights on me and not knowing what it felt like to hear the actual orchestra.
Yeah.
And of course, because of my hearing issues, I also was afraid I would miss the music cue where I just start talking.
Yeah.
There's so many concerns like that, but it was thrilling. And I'm really happy I did it. And I cherish the photo I have backstage with the cast because I love every one of them.
I love that you've been on Broadway. And I when you talk about these things, like doing that, like shitting yourself in preparation for that one night only thing, and even like with your hearing, I think these are the kinds of things that expand our empathy.
That's right.
Really, you know what I mean? Like when you're like, oh, this is what it's like to be this scared to do something, or this is what it's like to, talk about something that wasn't easy for me to talk about before. I just feel like it's so empathy expanding those things.
It is. And to feel that and do it anyway. Like you said yes to it. You said yes and you kept saying yes.
Brave.
You know, like you could have canceled at any time in those 6 weeks, but you were like, I'm doing it. Yeah.
Right. I had to cancel. I dehydrated myself because I shit myself for 6 weeks. So we're fascinated. We are fascinated on this podcast with the topic of failure or perceived failure. Can you tell us about something creative that you've attempted that you perceive as a failure and how you process that and what you learned from that?
It was April 26, 2020. It was the night of the Sondheim concert. It was Take Me to the World. That to me felt like a horrible failure.
What?
Well, because it didn't go up on time. I'm sure you remember. It was like the stuff of legend. That
it's funny. That's not what I remember about it.
So that's great that now.
But you'll never forget it. Yeah.
That's how it is now remembered. But in the moment, I felt so much pressure to not only Raul Esparza who came to me with the idea of doing this concert, and Mary Mitchell Campbell, Bill Curran, our other producer. To them, I felt a responsibility.
Yeah.
But to Stephen Sondheim and every musical theater performer who I ever loved, who turned in all this amazing material to us. And there was a Zoom call with everybody that one of my regrets is that I was not able to be in this moment, because there was a Zoom call that happened right before the show was supposed to go live. And I was sitting in front of my computer trying to finish the show while being on my phone on this Zoom call where every Broadway icon I've ever loved on a Zoom call, and Stephen Sondheim sharing special lyrics he wrote to Sunday in the Park with George about the concert, and not being able to take that moment in, because I just wanted to say to all of them, by the way, it's probably not happening on time. But I was still sort of
just finish
operating.
This real quick.
I was still operating under this hope that I was going. It was all about getting this. The Ladies Who Lunch number, which I'm sure you've heard of. That number was not finished until I think I got the final edit, I want to say an hour or two before the concert.
And that was performed by Meryl Streep, Audra McDonald,
and Christine Baranski.
And you were like, come on, this is the anchor of this piece.
Well, we knew that was the surprise. That was the big element of surprise that that was. But there were so many amazing things, but it was really just, I knew it was crazy. I knew we weren't going to finish it. I knew we weren't going to meet the deadline. So when we didn't, because what actually happened is it went live once, and then Raul was on camera and there was no audio, and then I had to shut it down, and then it had to go live again. It was horrible. It was horrible and emotionally very difficult for me. Yeah. But I have a very steady. My boyfriend was running in circles around my house, like, what is happening? What is happening? Where's the show? I was staying pretty calm, and then we figured it out. And then, like, there were some segments that were supposed to go live, and I just immediately wrote to Mary Mitchell Campbell and Raul Esparza and said, "Can you please film those segments, and I'll edit them in live? Like, if you film them, I can edit them in." So I had to do a lot of
news.
Yes, it was Holly Hunter, man.
Wow.
And there was some last minute scrambling to figure out.
Cusack running with that videotape.
Oh my God!
Sliding under the file cabinet, getting it in.
By the way, over 100,000 people waiting for the concert to start. Like, I could see the numbers.
I can see.
And
gotcha.
I'm sitting in my guest room in my house. It was a mess. So by the time the concert ended, I knew people liked it.
Yes.
But it still took, that night, and then the next day, and then I got some beautiful emails from people. And I don't know if you have this experience, but people don't email and congratulate as much as none of us do. None of us congratulate each other as much as we're
on to the next. We're busy.
So the fact, So the fact that I got all these beautiful notes and letters and press attention, and so it was great, but I still can't completely speak about the experience.
Well, I hope.
I just did, but I had a meeting with Raul and Mary Mitchell Campbell and Bill, and there's certain I was just like, can we stop talking about this? I don't want to go through the nitty gritty of that night. I just want to sort of.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very proud of it now.
It's interesting because I think what happened to you in that night was this huge chemical dump of adrenaline and cortisol in your system. And that just takes time to wash out of one's system. What did you learn from it? How might you operate differently in the future?
I think I should have been a little more vocal about the deadlines. It's a fine line when you're doing charity work, right? It was a charity for Step, Artists Striving to End Poverty, Mary Mitchell's organization, and when you're working with people doing charity work, you know, there's the whip is that much less of a snap on it, because, you know, if they're a little late, if it takes a little longer. I do vividly remember saying to Raul the Monday before the Sunday night concert, so a full week before, I remember saying to him Monday morning, I think we should maybe delay it. I do remember saying that. Like, I had that. I do remember having that insight at that point.
Yeah.
But we were kind of in too far, and I just thought, okay, what the heck? We're going to figure this out. And
you knew.
And during the week, honestly, it started to feel okay, and then different. It's just, so I think the lesson would be to stand my ground a little bit, because at the end of the day, I was the director and my name was on it as the director. And so I should have sort of put my foot down and said, no, that's great, but actually this is what we actually need to do. And instead of, I think I can get a little bit passive about big personalities sometimes, and also people I admire and people who are stars and all of those extra elements. But also at the end of the day, they all needed me to hit the button to make it go live.
That's right.
So I think it was just kind of owning your place in the process, and being vocal about what you need, about what everybody needs. Everybody has their own needs to get something done.
That's right.
And what was your favorite segment from that concert? You say yours, I'll say mine. Ready? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Elizabeth Stanley.
2. So I love Elizabeth Stanley. She was incredible. And by the way, Mr. Sondheim really loved that performance.
We love you, Elizabeth Stanley, listener to the podcast. But that's not why I said Elizabeth's name. I said it because that performance was a masterclass.
I mean, I could name, there aren't weak performances in that night. Like I love the entire thing. But the reason why I said It Takes Two, which is Ben Platt and Beanie Feldstein, is because they gave me one of my gasp moments when the footage was coming in, because they had choreographed some moves separately together. And so when we first saw the footage together and realized that they had planned it out, I think that just spoke to me, because, I know that they're theater kids that grew up loving Broadway together and doing
theater
that in their bedroom. So I love the idea. I love the idea that they put that extra level of thought into it. So that's why that just popped in my head first.
Yes. Yeah. That's a very good answer. We shall accept the answer. Yes.
Hey, is there a creative thing that you absolutely need to do before you're done?
Before I'm done with my career?
Yeah. Or before you're dead.
I
have right now, I have 15 things in my head that are percolating.
Pick one.
I can't specifically. Oh, it's really hard. I don't know. I don't know that I think about things in sense of, oh man. I mean, there might be a book, there might be some podcasts, there might be some TV projects, there might be a documentary film. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's no, I guess the short answer is no, that there isn't a thing that I really feel like I have creatively satisfied a lot of itches in me. I think right now, like I said about the looking back, the history stuff we talked about.
Yep.
I feel like I have always kind of taken for granted, and this came out of these live videos I've been doing. I feel like I've taken for granted my interest in history and in sharing history with people. I think I'm really good at looking at the history of something and diluting what makes it an interesting narrative. So I'm starting to realize, I think I just took for granted. I think I thought everyone does that. Everyone thinks that way about history and theater history. And now I'm starting to realize, no, wait a minute, that's actually something you're good at. Yeah. So I definitely have some interest in some projects that would exploit that a little bit.
Yeah.
I love introducing, with these live videos, people have been joining me, and I don't schedule them. I just suddenly go live, and sometimes the same people are there, and they say little things to me like, "Oh, thank you. Thank you for introducing me to that. I didn't know anything about that, and that's so fascinating. And this show sounds really great, and I'm really into this." And another friend of mine, actually, Deborah Lopez, photographer Deborah Lopez,
The aforementioned.
texted me last week a picture of her husband, who's a musician, on his phone looking at one of my videos. And she wrote to me and she said, he's obsessed with your videos. You're literally teaching him about Broadway. He just finds it so interesting. And he didn't even know they cared. And he's finding it really interesting the way you're doing it. And I was like, okay, that's the best reaction I could have ever gotten from this like straight Irish rocker guy. Like, so
Deborah Lopez married Bono? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Bono, Deborah Lopez. So that's definitely something that I'm going to explore. That's not really a specific answer, but it's a focus.
In the
It's a good
future,
one.
you'll be looking to the past.
The answer is more. I'll be doing more.
That's right.
I like it.
Yeah.
So, Paul, you've been in the creativity business for a while. Give us some good creative advice.
Well, to jump off what I just said, don't assume that other people have the same perspective you have. I think it takes, or that they have the bravery to share
That's right.
that. You
That's
know what I mean? So I think you have to really sort of figure out what you're interested in and what your take is on it, and just go for it. And don't immediately put like rules up or sort of how things have to be defined. I feel like I did that a lot earlier in my career. I would also say that don't do it for people, giving you likes or positive comments, or, you know what I mean? I've never really had that in my DNA. I feel like I've always feel like I'm sort of just doing things for myself to express myself. And I think that's really important to figure out what that is. I also think that people should make things. I mean, you guys talk about this all the time, but like, there are so many tools now for people to make things.
Yes.
And if I wanted to have this career, if I was 20 years old now, I'm sure I would be creating all kinds of content. It's free.
That's right.
I made a magazine in the 90s that I basically wrote and designed myself. But the reason why I couldn't keep doing it was because I had to pay $2,000 to the printer to print it on paper. And now that's not necessary.
No need. Yep. They can bypass everything.
But also a lot of people say like, I want to do what you do. I want to be covering Broadway. And I always say like, well, make sure you're doing it with a professional mindset, or the mindset of however you want to be seen. Because I feel like a lot of people just start creating things in kind of like a sloppy, especially in social media. They just sort of like jump in and it's fine to like play around with it a little bit. But if you want to be seen as someone who is offering their opinions of the theater world, then pay attention to what you're actually putting out there with your name on it. And I think that's pretty important too, to sort of think about what's the end game? What's the long game?
Quality,
where do you want to be doing this?
Quality.
That's right.
Yeah, quality. Sure.
Yeah. I like it.
Here's a question we ask all of our guests. We don't say this to everyone, but we'll say this to you. You work really fucking hard. You work really hard. What's it all for?
What's it all for?
What's it all for? Going out on a light note.
I mean, I said it before, but I leaving something behind is actually important to me.
Legacy.
Yeah.
I really love having all of I know YouTube will outlive us all, and I love having my videos out there, and I love having my interviews, and I love that people can maybe discover what I did many, many years from now. So that is important to me. And obviously creative fulfillment. I think I would have said, one thing that's really shifted is a lot of people that get involved in the Broadway community, they're sort of dazzled by the showbiz element and the stars and and I definitely was very excited a lot of times about the stars and trying to like meet all kinds of stars, get time with stars, try to build relationships with stars sometimes. And a lot of that has sort of like fallen off a little bit. It's like, I'm just kind of like, no one, having said all of this, Bernadette Peters still wows me. And I have worked with her I helped her bring Broadway Barks to the internet last year. And I told myself this year, I was like, I don't think I can I have to be really careful with my time. And then I get an email from Bernadette Peters and I'm like, I'll do it. Let's do it.
It's all for Bernadette Peters.
Yes.
So
It's all for Bernadette Peters.
She still has some pull over me.
Okay.
But so I feel like that it definitely feels more like a business when you start doing it for a while. But that feels good. It feels good to not be distracted by that. You know what I mean? I'm not intimidated.
Things, yeah.
Yeah, the sparkly things. Yeah.
Yeah. Finally, who or what is sparking you these days?
Mm-hmm.
We know you're sparked by old Broadway vinyl. Anything else?
And Turner Classic Movies.
Movies.
I tape so many movies now. I'm my YouTube TV. I'm just always recording things, always. And then because I'm finding myself not inspired by what like the hot new Netflix, Amazon, Hulu shows. That's something recent in the last few months. Every one of them, I'm just like, I like lose interest after one episode.
Is there a particular Turner Classic movie and a particular piece of Broadway vinyl? Are there two titles you could point us towards?
So I kind of have a weird vinyl thing. I firmly believe that, and I think I'm going to say it because I don't like snobbery, and I don't know if you know, but there's a lot of that in the theater world. Sometimes
I've heard of it.
And I think it's really important to remember, when you're talking about like a classic title of a classic play or musical, it's kind of whatever your first exposure to that title was.
Sure.
So, but a lot of times you learn after the fact that was sort of the wrong one. You know what I mean? When people say like, you like that.
You liked that.
And that's where the
Please say
snobbery.
you're a good man, Charlie Brown. Please say you're a good man, Charlie Brown.
So I actually want to shout out that I friggin' love the soundtrack of A Course Line.
The movie
that you're supposed to hate.
Scandal.
He said it.
It has some, and I said it because I despise snobbery, and I love thinking that people just rolled their eyes when I just said that. I just love thinking that maybe there was a little bit of like this guy. Oh, forget this guy. But that movie was huge for me, and it really helped me fall in love with Broadway. And I will also say that when I was a kid in the video store, remember video stores? They used to have the big stand-ups, right?
Sure.
To promote movies,
Cardboard,
just like the stand-ups. And my video store used to give me the stand-ups. So I had this enormous Course Line stand-up of them all. It's just photographed by Patrick Demarchier with these gorgeous gold. Audrey Lander.
Pardon me.
How dare you? And so, who I recommend following on Instagram. And so anyway, I had this stand-up in my childhood bedroom of A Course Line. And they would look at me every day, all these showbiz types. And the punchline of this is that I bought this soundtrack vinyl on eBay because I wanted to revisit it.
Yeah.
And by the way, when I did this live video, people literally sent me direct messages yelling at me for talking about the soundtrack and not the original Broadway cast recording, which I also love.
But
by
you were
the
like,
way.
I meant to say the soundtrack.
I said the soundtrack.
I said it and I meant it.
So I'm looking at this vinyl, looking at this photograph that I had in my bedroom, and I'm like, God, I love this photograph so much. It's sparking things in me.
Yeah.
It's like, I think I used to look at these people and think, this is showbiz. This is Broadway.
Yeah.
And so I went online and I just said, like, I wonder if there's any other photos by Patrick Demarchier of A Course Line. I Googled it, and within 10 minutes, I bought a huge old Subway poster from an art gallery, and it's now being framed. So I will have in my bedroom in about a week, I have this huge version of this image that every Broadway snob will make fun of.
It's back in your bedroom.
The only thing that could have made this story better is if you had gone on eBay and bought the Blockbuster cardboard cutout from your mom on eBay, and she shipped it from your childhood bedrown.
And
that
you know
would have
what?
been the only thing better.
Bless you, but I'm too old. Blockbuster wasn't even around yet. It was the Ma and Pa video store down the corner. It was.
I love that you had the hookup, though.
I love that, but I'm going to go ahead and count that vinyl and that film as your film that you're recommending as well, just to fuck with people.
And I'm really sorry for everybody that What I Did for Love is sung by Cassie, not Morales. I know it's a mistake, but I actually think a lot of things in the movie are really good, including Audrey Landers, even though she didn't do her own dancing.
We already had 1,000 listeners tune out. I'm sorry. We lost them. We lost them at this point. This is fun. You're fun.
It was fun.
I just want to say that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to our guest, Paul Wontorek.
Thanks for having me. Long-time listener, first-time guest.
Right? So that's it. This episode of The Spark File was made on Muncie, Lenape, and Seminole land, and we hope that it put another bunch of sparks in your file. Listen to me. If there's a spark you'd like us to explore, or if you've taken a spark and fanned it into a creative flame and you'd like to share that, email us at thesparkfile@gmail.com or submit it through our website, thesparkfile.com.
We'll even happily take your feedback, but you know the price of admission. First, you have to share a creative risk that you have taken recently.
And be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe, rate, 5-star review it. If you like this podcast, share it with people that you love. And if you didn't like it, I don't know. Paul, what do you say to your critics?
Well, so I was criticized for commenting on the Chorus Line soundtrack over the cast album, and I went out and bought an enormous poster and I'm having it framed for my bedroom.
That's what you say.
I think I put it on the wall.
You just lean straight into it. You have it framed and you put it on the fucking wall. I love it. I love it.
God, if something tickles your fancy and gets your creative juices flowing, we are writing you a forever permission slip to make that thing that's been knocking at your door. It's your turn to take a spark and fan it into a flame.
You got to take it
and make it.
Make it.
Bye.
Bye, Paul.
Bye. If anyone's still listening after that chorus line.
Scandalous.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the chief creative officer and chief marketing officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.